Lightning in a Bottle, I Love Lucy, Gunsmoke, 60 Minutes, MASH, The Tonight Show, All in the Family, Saturday Night Live, Seinfeld, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones. These are some of the most iconic pieces of television that have ever aired in terms of popularity and longevity in the American landscape. However, there is one show that is singularly the most recognizable in all of history and perhaps worldwide to boot. It holds the record for longest-running American animated series, longest-running American sitcom, and the longest-running American scripted primetime television series ever. That, of course, is The Simpsons. I don't have to give an oral history of that show to anyone. It's part of our DNA. Its influence is indelible. The geniuses that developed it, Matt Groening, James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon, rest in peace, have hired a steady roster of equally genius writers and showrunners to maintain the show's integrity and profound impact on our culture. Today we have one such master of his craft. Along with creative partner Bill Oakley, he was a writer, producer, story editor, supervising producer, consulting producer, executive producer, and showrunner for 6 years on The Simpsons, along with other shows such as Futurama, Mission Hill, Strange Hill High, Danger Mouse, Gravity Falls, and Disenchantment. Today, we welcome television writer-producer Josh Weinstein on this episode of $5 Buzz.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of $5 Buzz. I am your co-host, Roger Mayer, out here in Los Angeles. Also out here in Los Angeles. Well, actually, let me jump backwards because our usual co-host, Mr. Pete Liska, is on assignment, as George likes to say. And that is who I'm introducing next, Mr. George Cursar out in Connecticut. How are you, George?
Great. Roger, this is night 3. We're 3 in a row and feeling good. We're locked in. We got another world-class guest, so I'm excited. Let's go, man.
That's awesome. And today, our usual buzzard, who does all of our artwork, Mr. Nate, the Skate Garden. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. My wife's in Temecula drinking her face off with her girlfriends. I'm home with the boys. We got Netflix on the couch out there. They got a bowl full of jelly beans. It's boys' night here down in Orange County, so we're doing good.
Well, that's awesome. Gentlemen, I want us to all take a nice big welcome of our guest here today. We have a veteran showrunner, done a couple of things that you might have heard of, such as The Simpsons, and he also worked on Futurama. He also was a showrunner for Danger Mouse, right?
No, I was just a writer for that. I was a hanger-on for that.
Just a hanger-on for that, he says. He also wrote episodes of Gravity Falls, and you helped co-develop with Matt Groening Disenchantment on for Netflix just a couple years back. We are very happy to extend a warm, welcoming hand to Mr. Josh Weinstein. How you doing, sir?
Good, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
What part of the world are you talking to us from?
I'm sitting in our Disenchantment offices in Santa Monica that have been like abandoned since COVID began. So it's like I came back here like a few months ago, and it was like the Mary Celeste, where like things like food and stuff was just left on the table, like when we left it a year and a half ago. But now I'm coming into the office because it's like it's easier to do things. All our stuff is by Zoom. So, but it's I spent the last year sitting in at my kitchen table doing Zoom, and I was starting to hate my house, because I associated with work. So I didn't want to do that. So I'd rather come in and hate the office. So that's where I am.
Well, that's awesome. So I mean, as far as you getting out of the house and going to work, I mean, I also work out of the house as a producer. I make films myself. And, after a while, you just have to get up and get outside and go take a look at some. And I live in a cave, so it's even worse, Josh, because it's literally a cave where I live in.
Like a real cave?
Well, it's a beer cooler to be exact.
Oh, nice.
I live at the brewery here on the east side. It's a old Pabst Blue Ribbon brewery. So,
I know somebody I think who lived. Maybe it's do you know Ed Culver?
Yes, of course I know who Ed Culver is.
All right, and if this is that long boy, he dated my ex-girlfriend who introduced my wife and me to each other. So anyway, that has nothing to do with nothing. But anyway, he's a cool, really nice guy. So I know exactly where you are.
Photographer.
Yeah.
He did all the punk rock stuff in the 70s.
Yeah.
All right, sir. So, Mr. Josh Weinstein. So you go to Stanford, you work, you're editor-in-chief with the Stanford Chaparral. I think I pronounced it correct. And then you graduate, get out there in the world, write a couple of screenplays, spec scripts for Seinfeld and one for The Simpsons, and then lo and behold, boom. And
it's boom with long periods of unemployment between and before the boom. Because I think like everybody this was like I went to school in the 80s. And by the way, I hated college. And the only thing I liked, my only salvation was the humor magazine,
right?
Chaparral. And it was just like a few fellow weirdos, and we just hung out in the offices but that taught me everything I need to know about production and stuff, was putting together that magazine. But then everybody thinks like especially this was the late 80s, there was like a comedy boom with like Letterman and stuff. Yeah. And I think people like me and my partner, Bill Oakley, thought we were going to get jobs right away. That was not true.
Josh, can you tell us a little bit about when you left the Bay Area and what was New York like in the late 80s? And I think you were working on a show that was Dennis Leary on that program.
Yeah. It was like, he was like a known comedian, but that was it. Yeah. Cause Bill and my writing partner, Bill Oakley, and I still do stuff together. Some stuff we do separate, some we do together, but we're best friends from high school in DC. So right after college, we moved back to DC for a couple of years, but then we got hired for this cable job in New York. Comedy Central used to be 2 comedy channels. It was Ha and then the Comedy Channel, and they merged. And we worked for Ha, which was the lesser, low budget one that wasn't as good. However, we worked on a game show and a talk show that was hosted by Dennis Leary when he was kind of just starting out. And he was great, and is nothing like his on-screen persona, where he's like just like a lovely, well-spoken, nice guy.
You're saying that he is in real life a lovely, well-spoken.
Yes, that's not his screen persona.
Yeah. I see. Okay. Well, so that's awesome. So you guys,
and that was like New York. I loved New York so much.
What years were you there again?
That was like 1989 to like 1990, right to the beginning of 1991, which is when we got hired for a job out here. And we're like, oh, we're going to make the big time. We're going to LA. And we came out for this job that was on the show on NBC, and it was canceled after 3 episodes. And then we were unemployed. Literally, our unemployment was running out. Like we were on the last week, and we didn't know what we're going to do. And Bill was like, maybe I should move back to DC and get a job at the State Department or something. And so but we had done a couple of freelance things, these small gigs. And we were very lucky that we got assigned a freelance episode of The Simpsons. And so
was that the one called Marge Gets a Job?
Yeah, that's Marge Gets a Job. That was our first one. That was totally rewritten for the better. But it was like, I don't have the exact timeline, but basically we had run out of unemployment. There were a couple other gigs. And then we got an offer for one show, and we had written this one Simpsons, and we said to our agent, hey, can you just call the Simpsons and see if they have a job? And it just so happened that there was a team of guys, Jake Hogan and Wally Wolodarski, who were leaving. And so it was the right time, perfect time, because they had a space for a team, and we were a team who they knew, and then they hired us. And that was like end of 91, maybe.
And were you guys also involved with Conan O'Brien? Was he starting out on that show too?
I have some good Conan stories, because when we joined The Simpsons, he was the other new guy. He had just been hired like 8 months before us. So, and all the other guys were like the old guard, the original comedy gods. So like we were like the new young guys. So like we kind of like would hang out and stuff. And Conan is exactly like he is on his show. And so like working with Conan on a Simpsons was like a 10-hour version of being on his show. Because everybody else is like me, is like kind of like quiet, nerdy person, and Conan's Conan. So he's always putting on a show.
So Josh and Bill write a spec script called Marge Gets a Job. So Josh and Bill get a job in working with Conan. And then you wrote for the first year that you were on, and then how long before you became a showrunner?
We were like, that was the third season. Like we started, and we were huge Simpsons nuts beforehand. Like we were like everybody else. We had like videotapes of every episode, and we were obsessive nerds of it. So it's like a dream, literally a dream job. And so, but what happened is like the Simpsons is really good at promoting people. It's really fair. Like so every year you get it rise up one rank. But what happened is like when we came to run the show, it's Conan was going to run the show. And he was going to run the show after like season 6 or 7, but then he got this other job. And so there was like there's a space. And we were the most senior guys after Conan left. So we were kind of just like lucky that we were there, and we filmed, then we got the job.
So awesome. You guys were kind of there when like I think we're all of the same similar age, but you know, when The Simpsons came out, it was kind of like a cultural phenom. I mean, Bart Simpson character for a couple of years was kind of like this
commercials and
you know, he had his own rap CD, the t-shirts. It was like monoculture MTV, just like an overwhelming presence in pop culture. So what was that kind of like? Did you guys have this pressure on yourselves to kind of
it was weird. It's weird because we were huge buffs of it already. So, but when you're there, it's like it was like a real bubble, because also like there was not, the internet didn't really exist. And so like weren't even getting fan feedback except on these like little sites where it was always, by season 4, people were saying worst episode ever. That's where it comes from. Like in the best season of the best show ever, fans were already going like worst episode, but it was a real bubble. And the great thing about the show was like, so we were just writing for ourselves, like to make ourselves laugh. And like, that was it. And it's also because of the way the show was set up when like Jim Brooks and Matt Groening and Sam Simon sold it. And Jim Brooks was really powerful in movies then. Yeah. And so that's why they got Fox to agree. And Fox was a new network. So they got Fox to agree to no notes, no interference, which never happens and would never happen again. So it really was this like little bubble. We were like sat in these really crummy rundown offices on the Fox lot, and it was delightful.
Was Brooks involved when it was originally aired on the Tracy Ullman show before it became a series?
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing too is that when it was on Tracy Ullman, the writers didn't want to write for this stupid little thing called The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And so it was like it was guys like Jay Kogan, Wally Wolodarski, who were PAs on that show. And they said like, well, who wants to write for this stupid cartoon that we don't like? And they and a couple other people volunteered. So it was, but Jim Brooks was very much involved, especially like in the first few years.
A couple of houses in the Cayman Islands and Who's Laughing Now, right?
Yeah.
So can you speak to like the development of the show? Like, how does the show start? Like, you get a team of writers, you just come in and pitch an idea and you just blow up from the, how does it show?
Yeah, it depends. Like for The Simpsons, the story is that a producer who worked for Jim Brooks, you know, and he was a big movie director, saw these cartoons with Life in Hell by Matt Groening, and one of the producers gave Jim Brooks like a framed copy of one of Matt's cartoons that was really funny, and he loved it. And so I think he was the one who was like, let's do these shorts on a Tracy Ullman show. And it's like, and then Matt did these quick drawings based on his family and named them after members of his family. and then it kind of like took off from there. So, but that's really unusual, because normally you have to spend like years developing a show, and then you go out and pitch it, and then they buy a pilot and blah blah blah. And it's gotten even harder over the years. But that was a quick phenomenon in a way.
It's like a perfect storm. It's just
yeah, exactly. And then perfect storm too, because then they hired this great like writing staff of people who were not classic sitcom writers, but were like weirdos from all different walks of life.
So when an episode gets written, though, like someone comes in with an idea and you guys just rap back and forth like jazz on, like how does an episode come to be? Like
that's a good question. It's like it either comes from like the showrunner has a bunch of ideas they want, or the writer comes. Like we would have every year. There's like 2 story conferences, which is just like where you're like locked in a hotel room for 2 days. You go home at night, but it's like and every writer comes with like maybe like 3 ideas, and they pitch them to the room, and that the room is just like the writers. And at the time it'd be Jim Brooks, Matt Groening, and Sam Simon. And you pitch the ideas, and it's a really friendly, it's intimidating because those guys are huge, but it's like a very nice environment, and they just decide which episodes they want to do. Then in those 2 days, you kind of flesh them out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd go back to the rewrite room, and you'd spend like maybe 3 more days pitching it out just with the writers and Matt and Sam. And then you'd go off and you write the script in like 3 weeks. You do a first draft
per episode.
Yeah, per episode. And then the showrunner gives you notes, then you do another draft. Then it goes to the room, and the magic of The Simpsons is like so much is rewritten in a room.
Yeah.
And also because it's an animated show, like if you're doing a sitcom, you got to write it in a week and you film it the next week, and then that's it. But with an animated show, the time frame is like 10 months. So there are like 5 different times you can rewrite the show. And that's why The Simpsons is so good, is because it's constantly
edited,
being honed and edited. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the Saturday Night Live nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also like, there's a big difference. Like I've heard, because also a number of Simpsons writers also worked on Saturday Night Live. And there's a huge difference Saturday Night Live has a real cutthroat environment where every writer's out for
culture.
Really negative and really unpleasant and really stressful. And The Simpsons and other Matt Groening shows are the opposite, where it's a total democracy. And it didn't matter, like when we were like the new guys or like a writer's assistant, if they pitch a joke and it's funny, it goes in. Or if they have an idea, it doesn't matter. Like all egos and seniority are left at the door. So it's like it's a real democracy, like a real humor lab, and that's what makes the show so good, is because you don't have that stress.
That's yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Josh, it's funny you mentioned Comedy Central, because my daughter and I were watching. It's funny, the Simpsons kind of transcends time and space. And I remember when you said Fox was just starting out, but I think The Simpsons and Married with Children really put that network on the map and gave them a lot of potential, right, to go on to do bigger things. And but I remember my daughter and I were watching the episode Who Shot Mr. Burns, and they were talking to the crowd, and I think you guys took a shot at Comedy Central. It's like, I'm watching Comedy Central, and the other characters was like, oh, that's terrible. But knowing
that was our episode.
I thinking that maybe you guys were doing like a competitive jab at like the Comedy Central guys, which I appreciate. But after The Simpsons, you were running this, you were part of a team, and then the show became very successful. Did you have a lot of leverage to kind of do what you wanted after that, or how did your next projects and ideas come to fruition after that?
Yeah, well, it's also like we were like, The Simpsons was already like the weird thing is, like at the time it was a huge phenomenon. It was before we worked on it, but at the time people over 40 did not watch the show and really didn't know about it. So like we'd go like, while we were like running the show, and after, like we'd have meetings with executives, and it was clear they didn't know the show. So it was like, it was popular among young people and kids, but it was like a weird thing, because you knew it was like a big hit, but it didn't totally help us, but it did help us.
The boomers were still running things then.
Huh?
The boomers were still running things.
Yes. It's don't make me go on about them. But it was like it was a real weird thing because you're in this bubble of The Simpsons and you love it and you know they're diehard fans, but then you go for a meeting and they don't know what you're talking about. But it did give us like it was an era where like comedy writing you could get like overall deals, and stuff, and so we were able to wangle a deal with a company, and then we developed our animated show Mission Hill with them, with Castle Rock, which was doesn't exist anymore, but was like a really great company because it's run by Rob Reiner and it was real comedy oriented and they were really supportive. But so yeah, we did have some leverage, but it's not as much as you would think or you'd hope for, you know.
Was that Castle Rock?
Yeah, Castle Rock.
Yeah. So winning 3 Emmys helps a little bit get you in the room too. I mean, I imagine to some degree, despite the fact that they didn't know the work, but you know, I mean, at least you got in the room to pitch some stuff. Even
some hardware.
Did that help you at all?
No.
Oh,
I swear it's like people now, like nowadays, because now there's executives who grew up with like The Simpsons and Futurama. Now it opens doors. But back then, I swear it wasn't like it was like we had like a little bit of cachet, but it wasn't much.
Yeah, the people in charge of making the content, we just talked about this in a couple episodes last week, are those of us that grew up, you know, with the fetish for, you know, horror movies and EC comics and underground comics and all that stuff, you know, whatever. And, you know, they're running the show now. Finally, you know, they finally, what used to be considered adolescent material has now become, you know, very popular, very
exactly. And what we were considered like
that, by the way. So
yeah, well, because like we were like stuff we did was considered like really dark or really weird, and now it would seem really tame, but like we never got that because it's like we're not trying to do that, we're just doing what amuses us.
That's right.
But there's been a big nice cultural shift where like nerdy stuff and everything else has become much more in the mainstream.
So post Simpsons, I mean, when you start to get into, like you mentioned, you were able to get Mission Hill off the ground for a very brief period of time. And then you got, then do you jump to Futurama?
Yeah. There's periods of unemployment where it's like when it's also like, it's really hard to sell shows. So like after Mission Hill, and Mission Hill was canceled really abruptly. It was like, that was like a real low point because we had invested like a year and a half making that show with like a really great staff and people just loved it. And it was canceled really abruptly. And we were like, whoa, what the fuck just happened? And so, but then we kind of like Bill and I regrouped. And then there's a period where we sold and made a bunch of pilots, but most of them didn't go ahead. So, but it was a lot of that. It requires like a lot of hustling.
Yeah. Just a lot of running around.
And then, and we briefly in season 4, we worked on Futurama while also trying to do like sell those pilots and stuff. Cause we were friends, our friend David Cohen and Matt Groening they were running that. So they nicely let us on for that season. But then we did a bunch of pilots. A number of them got made. One got on the air, but then was canceled.
Which one was that?
That was The Mullets.
Okay, yeah.
Which was an awesome show. It was on UPN. And again, it was a really stupid but really funny show, and we loved it. And it was like the network was real supportive. It was really funny, but it got canceled. So whatever. And then so at a certain point, then also being a writing team in Hollywood is not good financially because like you have to split a salary. So like even when we were running The Simpsons, we're basically splitting a salary. So you make significantly less than if you're in an individual. And so Bill and I at a certain point were like, you know, we'll still do stuff together, but we're going to have to split up at some point. And so we eventually we did, but then we're like, we're still going to do stuff, and we're doing stuff now. In fact, we're about to pitch a spin-off of Mission Hill.
Oh, great.
In a few weeks that we've been developing. So yeah, then there's another failed animated show that sucked that I helped run. That was bad. I won't even mention it. And then after that, then I went on when Futurama was revived for Comedy Central. I was hired just on the staff of that, which I love because it's like when you run a show, there's nonstop responsibilities, but when you're on a staff, it's real fun. So I did that for a few years, and that was delightful. And then I also developed and ran a show in England, but a kids show that was a puppet show that I love. That was probably my favorite experience of all the stuff I've done.
What's the name of that show?
That was called Strange Hill High, and it was a puppet show. You can look it up. I think they have some episodes on YouTube. And we did 2 seasons, and it was delightful. And it was made with like real puppets, and it was really weird, delightful show. And the difference in like doing a show in England, like when we were developing it, the BBC executives actually said, "Could you make this weirder?" And like really like pushed us to like make it weirder and funnier. And it was just like that was such a great experience. And so like I wish I could go there and do more stuff there because it's a much more supportive, collaborative environment for comedy there.
I think Mr. Garden needs a spin-off of Strange Hill High.
Oh yeah, that's right. By the way, one of the teachers, it takes place in a weird school that was like built on a burial ground or whatever. Like this haunted, weird things happen in this school, and the 3 kids are always investigating it. And the cool teacher, the one teacher they really like, is Mr. Garden,
English
based
professor.
on our Mr. Garden.
Look at that!
Yeah,
see, 100,000 little Australian kids know my name.
Yeah, it was you know what? It was a big hit in England, Australia, and Ireland, and it's still shown. So yeah, there are kids all over the UK.
I got merch. I'm in a little storybook. I got it on the wall here.
Yeah.
It reminds me, a buddy of mine did a show called the Puckin' Fuppet Show. So it has some very similar dark humor. Guy named Bad Otis Link, and this sounds very, very similar. So
yeah, and that was the thing too. It's like it's a kids show, but it had like it wasn't like rude or anything like that, but it had some like dark humor. But it was like kids got it and loved it. It didn't,
There was a Netflix run for it. It was available on Netflix for a while.
Yeah, it was on Netflix Kids for a while too. And that's a show like Futurama that we're always hoping maybe they'll revive.
Yeah. And then, so then right after the Strange Hill High, and how many years did you do that?
We did that. I was doing that like concurrently with Futurama, but that was 2 seasons. I think it was like 23 episodes.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out. I haven't seen that.
It's fantastic.
I want to find that Mr. Garden puppet.
It's good stuff. I want the puppet. I understand it's like 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I want the puppet. You know what? If I go back there, like that, because all those puppets, they're all in storage in this facility in Manchester where we filmed the show. So yeah, if I could ever, I hope they revive the show. But if I could get the hands on the Mr. Garden puppet, I will. You will have it
in my sanctuary until the day they put me in the ground, Josh.
Yeah. The puppets are really cool. You should look at it. It's a great show.
Josh, can you talk a little bit about splitting from not splitting, but when you made the decision that you weren't going to write as a team, was that kind of, it's a big change from what you were used to, I suppose. So was that a big career, existential change, or was it just, did you have material and ideas that you were happy to work on without your partner?
It was kind of like, of course it was weird because also like my partner, it was also my best friend since we were like 16. So, but it was like, I think it's like we knew we'd be friends anyway. So it wasn't like, there was awkwardness at the initial split. But then it was kind of like all healed up.
It seems like that happened around the show but there was some. Just
yes, the show that I don't want to mention,
and I won't say
caused a lot of strife between us as well. And then it was like, but luckily, like within a year of that, it was like that was
one of you left,
past.
one of you stayed, one of you left.
Yes, I stayed. Bill Wisely left, so I'll give him credit for that. And but that caused friction. That was really hard. But then we kind of like then what happened was they wanted to revive a pilot that we had written together, and that kind of brought us back together. That was a drama. Then we actually we did sold to Bravo, but then we kind of got us back together, and then it was just like old times, and then it was like nothing had happened, and we sort of just moved on from there, which is nice.
How long did you not speak to each other? You don't have to say.
I don't know. Maybe it was like 6 months.
Well, it's not long.
So it's not bad. It's out of knowing each other for what? I'm 55. We know it's like what? So like knowing each other for like 40 years.
40 years, yeah.
Yeah. So it was unpleasant, and I blame myself as much for it. But it's like that. It's really was just luckily just a blip.
I go 2 or 3 years without talking to some of my best friends, and then it's like nothing ever changed.
This is your buddy. He wrote for the Harvard Lampoon. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So you're at Stanford doing your thing, and he's at two. That's
yeah.
Amazing.
And then so what would happen is like, yeah, I would go. I hung out. I started hanging out at Harvard in the summers, and like the Lampoon would do like these parody projects, and I was just hanging out. And the guys there were like really nice, the guys and girls. And so they just kind of welcomed me in, and then I helped on the projects.
Yeah.
And then they just like made me like a honorary member. But those people who were on the Lampoon at the time, besides Bill, also include like David Cohen, who went on to create Futurama, and Paul Sims, who created News Radio and is now running What We Do in the Shadows. And so it's like a real talented group of like really funny people.
Is that going on right now? Like on that campus, are the television honchos 20 years from now getting honed at the Lampoon?
There's some, but it's happening. The nice thing is like it's happening everywhere in the world. Like it's not like it used to be. Like the Lampoon was like one of a few things that where you could maybe hope to get a job in Hollywood, but now because of like the internet, there's such a bigger funnel of bringing potential people in, like, so it's not there. There's somebody in the Lampoon now who will become a successful writer, but there are other people who won't.
Yeah. Was there like a friendly rivalry between the Stanford and the Harvard?
Yeah. I mean, at least when Bill and I were doing it, and we actually did like a joint issue. So, but like the Lampoon is a much bigger operation that would have like 20 or 30 people on staff, and they have like a big funds. And the Chaparral was kind of like, even though Chaparral's really old, it's like 100 years old. It is much more rinky dink, and we'd be lucky if we had like 7 people who'd work on it.
Now, is that a club that you just join, or do you have to be recruited? How does that work on the campus?
For the Chaparral, it's just like if you show up, you're on the magazine because they need. But then it's just who shakes out. But like when we were there, like it's also like we would just like hang out in offices and drink on weekends and stuff.
Yeah. And
so it was like our weirdo social club for like maybe 10 people, 10 men and women at a time.
So that sounds like a good moment for a break.
Okay.
So let's take a minute, and we'll come right back, ladies and gentlemen, with more of Josh Weinstein. Hey, we have a quick favor to ask. We want to get the word out, and the way to help is for you to subscribe to us on either Apple or Spotify. And it would be really huge if you give us a rating and a review. Much love.
And we're back, everybody. This is $5 Buzz with Josh Weinstein. If you like the show, please support the show. Leave us a comment. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And hit the bell notification. That voice that you hear is Henley Cursar. She's a longtime listener. She's a first-time caller, and we wanted to give Josh a fan question. And Henley and I watched 2 episodes that were of The Simpsons that were written by Josh, and it was called Who Shot Mr. Burns, and we really appreciated it. I remember it when it came out. And Henley, what are your questions? You get 2 questions, so speak loudly.
Where did you come about the idea about it?
The idea for the show, correct?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. It actually wasn't our idea. It was Matt Groening's idea. Matt Groening, the guy who created The Simpsons, and it so happened Bill and I we worked in the offices, and there were rinky-dink old offices, and our office was at the bottom of the stairs, and Matt Groening's office was at the top of the stairs. And most writers were in the rewrite room, but because we were in our office writing the script, we were the first people Matt saw when he had the idea. And I still remember, I can envision it, where Matt Groening came to our door. It was a screen door, and he said, "Hey, we should do a show like Who Shot JR," that was a show called Dallas, which was in the 70s, which was kind of like a cheesy show, but it had a guy who got shot, and it was like a big mystery. And so Matt said, "Hey, we should do a show like that, but with Mr. Burns." And we were like, "That's a good idea. We'll write that." And then we did. But it came from
kind of like a cliffhanger from one season to the next.
Yeah, it was the first time there was like a 2-part episode. So we really planned it out like a real mystery, that we really wanted it to be like, you could solve this mystery and there will only be a one answer, but it was a genuine mystery. So it's really extra hard to write.
And Henley, you were guessing the whole time who you thought it would be, right?
So I thought it was Homer, but then they thought it was, then because I thought it was Mr. Smithers because he said it in the room, and then I knew who was it, but then I realized that it was Maggie because it showed up.
Those are better guesses than a lot of people had, because those guys all ended up being like the major suspects. So that's real good on you, because a lot of people didn't even get that.
Good powers of deduction.
Yeah.
And you have one last quick question before you go, right?
Yeah, and this is the funny one. Why did Mr. Burns need so much money if he was so old?
Because like some people like him in the world, he's so greedy that he doesn't care that he's old. He wants it all for himself. And it doesn't matter how old. And if he was shot, he wanted to keep it to himself, take it with him, not share with anyone, because he's a mean old jerk. Like some real people in the world.
I remember Homer, and he's been working there for 10 years.
Yeah, that was a running thing that Mr. Burns could never ever remember Homer or his name.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Those are good questions.
Thank you for calling in, and we'll hopefully call back into the show again soon.
Bye, Daddy.
Bye.
She outed you there. Bye, Daddy.
Yeah.
Josh, is there like in the early days, is there like a ritual, like when your show is released, do you tune in and watch it? Like, what did you do in the early on when your show was on prime time, something you made and created, and the whole world was going to see it? Did you sit down and watch it? Like, or are you so fed up with it and tired of it when it airs that you don't?
It's kind of a combination, because like before any episode airs, like we're editing it and watching it literally probably like 30 times. So like we kind of like know it by heart and are kind of sick of it, but still it was really thrilling to see what we did be on actual TV. So a lot of times we'd sit down with our friends and watch the episodes just because it was fun.
I always wonder about that, like creative types, if they watch these. Some guys, they say they don't watch their own movies and stuff. I always wondered.
Yeah. We watched it because we were fans of a show. And also, by the way, like, you know how like people are always quoting Simpsons lines? Yeah. Like we would be quoting them in the office before the episodes even aired. So like we're like the original fanboys, because there's certain lines like we would just say over and over and over again. And some ended up being popular and some didn't. But yeah.
yeah, there's more than half of the stuff I've worked on I have not seen, so I could attest.
Yeah, there's some shows like that show that caused Bill and me to split that I would never, ever want to see. But other shows that were happy experiences, which were most of them, I'd gladly watch.
When my films play Sundance, I sit in the audience and watch. That's a few times that I'll watch with the audience.
That seems like that must be cool.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, that's the thing too. So you worked almost exclusively in television.
We tried movies and we like sold a few and they never got made. So.
And you didn't work on the Simpsons movie, did you?
No, we were long gone when that came out.
By then. Right. So, and it's almost exclusively been animation too. So you haven't. How many live action stuff have you written or worked on?
We did the only live action show we did that got on the air was that one, The Mullets. We did a bunch of pilots that were actually great. And in fact, we did 2 pilots that gave Emma Stone her first 2 jobs in Hollywood. And one of them was a remake of The Partridge Family that was done. It was done by MTV, and it was just like a nightmare to do. But we found Emma Stone, who's named Emily Stone at the time, in this national talent search. Like we flew around the country, and she was in LA, but it was like literally picking her out of a crowd of 2,000 people. But because she was the most talented, so like we actually gave her first 2 jobs in Hollywood. And those were obviously live action, and there are a few other, but it just kind of ended up that like I was stuck in animation, and then I kind of just love animation, and now I prefer it. I don't want to leave. You have a lot more freedom.
You ever stick your own voice on there sometimes?
We did in Mission Hill. Bill and I both did voices, and probably on some other show I'll do that.
I mean, at this point, you've got to. I mean, 33 years that show has been running, The Simpsons, 33 seasons.
Yeah,
and you've got to work and write for probably the most famous, voice actors in history. I mean, and more or less outside of uber famous people that do a movie here and there, but people who, for the most part, I mean, I know that most of them have done acting. I know they're all actors,
right?
But I mean, they are way more famous for being those voices than they are being in. I mean, outside of Harry Shearer, maybe as far as being
right.
And I don't know what's it like working with Harry Shearer?
That what? That's like they're like at the time, like they were like Hank Azaria was just starting to get famous, and like Harry Shearer was known in comedy circles. Yeah. But other than that, it was like the actors are so like they're like famous now, but they're like real low key and really nice to work with. And even Harry Shearer, who's kind of famous as like being a cranky guy, he was like really supportive of us and like our episodes. So it's just like dealing with different personalities, but he was the same as the other people who are just like, they're kind of delightful. And like, they clearly liked working together and like ad-libbing and stuff. So it was kind of fun. Like I remember the first time Bill and I attended a table read, like we had to like cover our mouths from laughing so much because we were so amazed. Like I couldn't be like, I can't believe I'm sitting like 5 feet from Dan Castellaneta as he's doing like the Barney voice or whatever. And it was amazing.
Yeah. Watching those guys do it sometimes, when you see them actually doing it, it's kind of
it's insane.
A little bit.
The cameo goes like the Rock School and stuff. Like when like does like Mick Jagger come on set? Like
well, it depends. Like some people you go to, like occasionally, like when we did like Sonic Youth was on one of our episodes, and I was
just gonna ask you about Sonic Youth.
They were the best because it's like we were like that was like Matt Groening and my personal pick was Sonic Youth. Like we were like we have to have somebody from classic rock, somebody from rap, somebody from more indie rock, and so but Sonic Youth was Matt and my choice because we both loved them.
Well, Sonic Youth fanatic too, so there we go.
Yay! And so we flew. They were based in New York then, or recording an album there, or whatever. So we flew to New York. So besides recording them, then we got our own private Sonic Youth concert because they performed the theme. And I don't think we asked them to do that. I think they said, "Hey, we do a version. We've been working on this version of the theme. Want to hear it?" And we were like, "That's going in the show." so they were like that was really cool. Like they were really friendly. All the ones on that Homer Palooza, like Cypress Hill, were great. And Peter Frampton, in fact, was one of the top 5 guests we ever had. Just because he was so friendly and he was so gung-ho and he was so happy to like make fun of himself. That's the best type of celebrity guest is somebody who gets it and will make fun of themselves. Right. So that. What? There's, you know what? Here, I won't say who it is.
Okay.
Because they're a pretty well-known actor, but there was an actor who we recorded who was really difficult to work with and did not do that great a job. And then we cut them out of the episode.
Okay.
So they're and I won't name who it is. It's actually somebody who I really like. And I've gotten, for a few years, I was like, I couldn't watch their movies, but now I can. But anyway, there've been I think in the history of the show, there've been a few people who are real difficult to work with, but most are real, like they're either, like when we were doing it, it was more like if their kids or grandkids were fans of a show, then they got their grandpa or grandma to do it. You know, like Kirk Douglas or Glenn Close or somebody like that, but who may not have watched the show themselves. But most people are real friendly. I can tell you, like some guests, like when we had Bob Newhart, like all the writers came to the studio. Of course. And we're like, he's our god. But like, for example, when Elizabeth Taylor did it, every single person on the show, like 50 people came into the studio to gawk at her. So it just kind of depends on the level. But they're like, most of the guest stars we ever had were pretty friendly, except for that particular person.
But one person. That's awesome that you said Sonic Youth before I brought it out of you. I love that. So the success of that stuff and you going on, and obviously you haven't touched anything that's been that successful since. You have a couple things that have that are like the Disenfranchised. How many seasons is
Disenchantment? This is like we're doing. It's technically, I guess it's our like what it's like if you count every 10 episodes as a season, then this is our 5th. But yeah, no, I don't think I'm never gonna work on something that as that was like it's like
nobody will.
They said it's like that was lightning in a bottle. History. Yeah, you never like. There's like sometimes I wonder, like, you know, like in Apocalypse Now, like never get out of the boat. Like we could have just stayed on The Simpsons and it'd been fun, but like we wanted to go out and do our own stuff, which is great. And I learned a lot, but I will never come close to something like that. I know.
So now you fucking said my favorite movie. So now you just what do you?
All right, I'm obsessed with that movie. I have seen it like 10 times.
I've seen it about 90. And I've seen all 3 versions multiple times. The last one, the final cut, I saw it twice at the Cinerama Dome. Anyway, so shit, Josh. What's you got something in the hopper now? What do you got going on? What's happening right now?
Okay, right now I'm running Disenchantment. Like we're like in the, you know, because animation, like, so what we're doing now, it's not going to come on the air for like a year and a half. We have like a season in the can that's probably going to air in January. Meanwhile, I'm working on a couple other things. Like, as I said, Bill and I've been working for like 2 years on this spinoff of Mission Hill that we're about to go and pitch and try to sell to some network. We're doing that. I'm developing one other show that I can't say, but it's with some people who, again, like when I did Gravity Falls and Gravity Falls and Simpsons, I was a huge fan of before I worked on the show. And now I'm developing a show with some people from YouTube who I was a huge, insane fan of, that now I feel real lucky that I'm doing something to them. And so that's an animated show. And so we'll see about that.
You're in a position still where, you know, just like anybody, as a showrunner and as somebody who's a showrunner and a writer and a, you know, creator, developer, you still gotta, you know, Are you ever going to be able to just make something without having to go through somebody else? Do you ever just create something? As a writer, do you ever work with somebody and just on the side and do your own thing? I mean, I've made so many independent films that way. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. Instead of something that's necessarily studio driven. I know in television, it's almost impossible to do without that kind of.
But you know what?
I'm asking you, have you made anything independently of the studio system?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't. And I should have. It's this one thing with these YouTube guys. It's similar because we're doing it outside. It's outside of, they have their own thing.
Right. That's what I mean.
So that's like, to me, and that's the way of the future.
That's what I'm saying.
And it's also like it's so insanely refreshing because these guys have their own thing, their own operation. So it's just them calling the shots. And it's like, we're doing what we want to do. And then if some bigger entity studio buys it, great. But if not, they'll just do it, you know? And that is the way. There's so much. And the crazy thing is because like now there's so many channels and stuff, you'd think it'd be easier. But for some reason, the development process, when you do it with studios, has become, and I've heard this from every writer I know, literally like 5 times longer. It's insane. Like it shouldn't take a year to develop something and go sell it. But it's just like there's so many fingers involved, you know.
And what's crazy is, despite, you know, going through the modern third golden age of television, right? And after The Sopranos and so forth, when that whole period of, I'm talking mostly live action stuff. Right. But as the more that you have the opportunity for access to channels and streaming platforms and so forth, it's funny how the degree of creativity shrinks too with that open space. You would think there would be a lot more, you know, where's the Unshin Andalou, you know, network channel? You know, where is the the Boonwell, you know, where's the avant-garde channel? Where's the more courageous or the more
right? That used to be Bravo. but it's not. Yeah. So no, it's there's more, but there's more crap. It's like that's like I'm always wanting like
Charnel House.
Yeah, like I want to see like the next Rick and Morty, but there's so many there's a lot more animated shows, but there are a lot ones that are cookie cutter that are just kind of copying other ones. And so it's
even copying themselves.
Yeah.
That show that's like eating its own tail.
Yeah.
What's the one that they had on Hulu that is exact replica of Rick and Morty? But made by Roland and Dan Harmon, which is really weird. I mean, I love those first 3 seasons of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's like, so there's a lot more, and there's still a lot more crap. So it is like, it's going to always be those things that come from left field.
Well,
is there a formula to comedy? Like you just think of funny shit and put it, how does it happen?
I think you just think of like something that you really like that makes you laugh, that seems like it's conducive to stories, you know? That's like combine a great idea with like really good characters.
Yeah.
And stuff. And then, but also like one thing, like also like so many animated shows make the mistake is like, it's also got to have a distinct look. Like you gotta like so many of these shows just look like they copy Family Guy. And it's like, no, you like need a distinct look. And if you're just a writer, go to a cartoonist that you like and develop it with them. But so it's like a bunch of different pieces that you bring together. And that like, if you can imagine a lot of stories coming from it, then it's a good idea. But it's like the ideas can come from any direction or influence, you know.
A lot of animation gets done, was it Korea, right?
Yeah, a lot of, because it's like there's Korea, Ireland, Vietnam. There are places where it's cheaper labor.
Yeah, of course.
And so there you hear about like some good companies there, but there's also companies that exploit people.
It's unfortunate. But you know, they're working. So people get to work at least. In some of those.
And one thing is like, that's one thing that happened during COVID is like live action shows shut down, but because animation is basically done remotely anyway. And you're like, the animators could take their decks home with them, writers can work remotely, and we even recorded the actors remotely. So it's like that, like animation stayed alive during the last 2 years where other shows had to shut down.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think we're getting about there. What are you thinking there? Last thoughts there, guys? Mr. George?
Yeah, Josh, I just really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to these projects that you got coming out. And it's cool just to see, like, my daughter was really got into the Simpsons, so it's really cool to talk to somebody that when I was not a little bit older than her, I was watching that show, and it was a big huge cultural phenom, and it's nice to be part of something that you can enjoy throughout the generation. So
that's it. We figured is especially cool these days, where it's because, like I said, when we were doing it, there's barely an internet, so it's literally only like the last 10 years that we're meeting people that, like, oh, we had an effect on you, and it's like the same. Like, we were huge fans of seasons 1 and 2 before we worked on it, so it's like we're the same thing. But it's the last 10 years. It's really cool meeting both now kids like your daughter who are just learning about it, but then also meeting adults who grew up on it. So like somehow, like, we influence, like, lines that came out of our heads now, like, these people are saying. So it's cool.
Yeah, and it's cool just to see the whole, for you to think back to where you were and working on something that was really important, and then have some little kid come in and ask you about it. It's got to be really rewarding. But I just want to say awesome. Thank you for everything, man. It's really cool of you to take your time.
The cultural fabric, man.
It's like that's really cool to have, like, have some thread in that fabric is really cool.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to say to your buddy there, Nate?
Yeah, hey, I love to Lisa and the kids, and thanks for coming on, Josh.
Yeah, likewise from them. I was just saying again, he was the absolute, not just like the best teacher that my daughter ever had, but they're just so cool and fantastic. So
thanks, man.
Thanks to you.
I'll bring that Mr. Garden puppet home for me.
Yes, I'm gonna go.
They're like 8 feet tall. You might have to get them.
Yeah, they're like this. If COVID calms down, I'm going to Manchester in April. So if I see those guys that go to that company, I'll find out about that puppet or steal it.
Oh, I love that.
Josh, I want to thank you for coming on board. You're now my new favorite writer of all television. Just because completely biased, I'm going to be on this.
I'll take that.
All right. And again, it's really wonderful to meet somebody who has touched the hands of God, of the major influence. I mean, one of the biggest shows in the history of television. It's The Simpsons is up there, man, with anything that's ever been important on television. There's no doubt.
I gotta say, we felt like when Bill and I started on the show, that's exactly how we felt like, oh my God, we're amidst comedy gods, and we better just like shut up till we know what we're doing. But it's the same thing.
I love
so in all of
60 Minutes, The Simpsons, The Sopranos. It's in that wheelhouse. It's what revolutionized and changed television and became beyond just the zeitgeist. Became part of the fabric and the DNA of then and the future.
That's cool. It's cool to think it's also, we were just trying to make ourselves laugh. So like,
and it was cool. That simple, that just resonated with the entire world.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's something, man. Hey, thank you so much again. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for this latest edition of $5 Buzz. If you have any comments or questions or ideas for topics or future guests, please email us at $5BUZZ, and that's FIVEDOLLARBUZZ@gmail.com. And we will get back to you as soon as we get done writing our own TV specials. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a
good night.
Bye.